Mom's recipes. Mom died on a Thursday morning. I held her hand as she took her last breath in the ICU at St. Mary's Hospital in Toledo, Ohio. Lung cancer took her in 4 months, too fast for a woman who never smoked and spent 78 years taking care of everyone around her. After the funeral, I returned to her house on Elm Street, the same house where I grew up, where Mom cooked Sunday dinners for the whole family for 45 years. Now it seemed too quiet, filled with the scent of her white shoulders perfume and the faint aroma of cinnamon that had permanently soaked into the kitchen walls. I knew I'd have to sort through her things. My brother Jin lived in California and only flew in for the funeral. Sister Karen was busy with her 3 kids in Cleveland. As always, all the heavy lifting fell to me, the only one who stayed in our hometown. I started with the kitchen. Mom always said the kitchen was the heart of the home. Her old 1985 General Electric gas stove still worked like new. The refrigerator was covered with magnetic family photos and discount coupons she never used. In the top cabinet, behind jars of flour and sugar, I found her recipe book. A thick, worn notebook with a brown leather cover that Mom had kept for 40 years. The pages were yellowed with time, some stained with batter or sauce, traces of thousands of meals prepared. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened the book. On the first page, in Mom's neat handwriting, Miller Family Recipes. Started 1983. With love, Dorothy. I smiled through my tears. Even in a cookbook, Mom couldn't skip the sentimentality. Flipping through the pages, I saw familiar recipes. Grandma Ruth's apple pie, the meatloaf Mom made every Wednesday, chocolate chip cookies she baked for school fundraisers. Each recipe awakened memories. But on page 47, between the lasagna recipe and tuna casserole, I saw something strange. Written in blue ink, Maria Gonzalez, 412 Oak Street, apartment 3B, 2 children, safe until Wednesday. I read the entry twice. What did this mean? Who was Maria Gonzalez? And what did safe until Wednesday mean? I kept flipping. On page 52, next to the banana bread recipe, Susan Jones, Highway 23 Motel, room 15. Moving to sister in Akron tomorrow. On page 67, Carol Wilson with daughter Emily, St. Teresa's shelter until Sunday, then Detroit to aunt. My heart started beating faster. What were these entries? Why was Mom recording addresses of strangers in her recipe book? I began systematically checking every page. The entries were scattered throughout the book, between soup recipes, salads, desserts. I counted 47 names total with addresses. All women's names, often mentioning children, and always some temporal information. Until Thursday, for the weekend, until she finds work. The handwriting was definitely Mom's, but different pens were used. Black, blue. Sometimes pencil. This meant the entries were made at different times over many years. The oldest entry was dated 1987. I remembered that year. I was 15, and Mom suddenly became very busy in the evenings. The most recent entry was from last November, just 3 months before Mom was diagnosed with cancer. I closed the book and tried to focus. Mom worked as a cashier at Thompson's Grocery for 35 years until retirement in 2019. She was an active member of Main Street Methodist Church. She volunteered at the homeless shelter on Saturdays. But these entries, they looked like something secret, conspiratorial. I picked up the phone and called my best friend, Linda Hartman. We'd been friends since childhood. She knew my family well. "Linda, can you come over? I need to show you something." 30 minutes later, Linda sat at Mom's kitchen table studying the recipe book. Her face grew more concerned. "Sarah, this is very strange. Your mom never mentioned any of these people. I don't know them either." "But look at the dates. This went on for more than 30 years. Linda flipped through more pages. "Sarah, what if your mom was helping someone? These entries about shelter, safe, moving. Maybe she was helping women in trouble." I didn't want to believe it. Mom was always kind, but she was also very cautious. She was afraid of big cities, rarely traveled beyond the next county. The idea that she was involved in something secret seemed absurd. "That's impossible." "Linda, Mom was the most ordinary person. She worried if I was 30 minutes late coming home. How could she be involved in some secret activity?" But doubts were already creeping into my head. I remembered the strange phone calls Mom received in the evenings. She always answered very quietly and quickly ended the conversation if any of us entered the room. I thought they were calls from church friends. I remembered how Mom sometimes unexpectedly disappeared on Saturdays, saying she was going to help at church. But when I once stopped by the church on a Saturday afternoon, Pastor Matthews said he hadn't seen her. I remembered the grocery bags Mom sometimes prepared in the evenings, large bags with canned goods, baby food, diapers. She said it was for church charity, but the bags disappeared from the house, and Mom never said who she gave them to. "Linda, I have to figure this out. Maybe some of these people still live at the addresses listed." The first address on the list was on Oak Street, just 10 minutes from Mom's house. We drove there the next day. 412 Oak Street turned out to be an old 2-story house divided into apartments. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged. I went up to the second floor and knocked on apartment 3B. An elderly Latina woman in her 60s opened the door. "Excuse me, are you Maria Gonzalez?" The woman shook her head. "No, I'm Rosa Martinez. I've lived here 5 years. Maria moved out long ago. Do you know where she is now?" "No, but my neighbor Mrs. Johnson has lived here 20 years. Maybe she remembers." Mrs. Johnson turned out to be a frail African-American woman with kind eyes. When I mentioned Maria Gonzalez's name, her face changed. "Oh, Maria, poor girl. Yes, she lived here in the late 80s. She had problems with her husband. He beat her real bad. One night she came with 2 children, all bruised up. My heart clenched. What happened to her? One woman helped her, brought food, children's things, got Maria a job at the grocery store, then helped her move to another town where her husband wouldn't find her. Do you remember this woman?" Mrs. Johnson smiled. "Of course I remember. Dorothy Miller, kindest soul in our town. She helped many women over the years." I felt the ground slip from under my feet. "Dorothy Miller, that's my mom." "Your mom? Oh my Lord." Mrs. Johnson pressed her hand to her heart. "And you're an angel's daughter. Your mom saved Maria and her children, and not just them." For the next 2 hours, Mrs. Johnson told me things I never knew about my mother. About how Mom secretly helped women escaping domestic violence. About how she used her job at the grocery store to provide them with food and necessities. "Your mom worked with the women's shelter in the next town, but sometimes the shelter was full, or women needed to hide somewhere closer. Dorothy knew safe places, churches, motels where the owners understood the situation. But why did she keep it secret from us? Because it was dangerous. Some of these men were really dangerous. One even threatened to burn down the store if he found out who was helping his wife. Dorothy was protecting you by not telling you the truth. I returned home in a daze. Mom, who I thought was a simple housewife and cashier, turned out to be a secret fighter for justice. All those years, while I complained that she spent too much time at church or with friends, she was saving lives. I opened the recipe book again and read the entries with different eyes. Now I understood the code. Safe until Wednesday meant the woman had shelter until Wednesday. Moving to Akron meant Mom had organized a new place to live in another city. Each entry was someone's rescue story. Over the next few days, I contacted the New Horizons women's shelter in neighboring Findlay. The director, Barbara Campbell, cried when I mentioned Mom's name. Dorothy was our secret angel. She never wanted recognition or thanks, just quietly did her work. Over the years, she helped more than 100 women. 100 women. I thought about Mom's economical dinners, how she bought clothes at thrift stores, fixed things instead of buying new ones. Now I understood. She saved every dollar to help strange women in trouble. Barbara, did Mom ever say why she did this? Barbara thought. Once, many years ago, she mentioned her sister, said she lost a sister to domestic violence, and didn't want other women to go through the same thing. Sister? Mom never had a sister. At least I thought so. That evening I called Aunt Martha, Mom's younger sister, who lived in a nursing home in Mansfield. Aunt Martha, did Mom have another sister? A long pause, then a quiet sigh. Sarah, honey, your mom never told you about Betty. About who? Betty was 2 years older than Dorothy. She married Frank Davis when she was 18. He seemed like a nice guy, but after the wedding, he started hitting her. Not hard at first, then worse and worse. I listened, holding my breath. Betty tried to leave several times, but he always found her. Back then, in 1965, there were no shelters for women. Police said it was a family matter. The church advised being a submissive wife. What happened to her? Frank killed her in 1967, beat her to death. Betty was only 22. Aunt Martha cried. Dorothy blamed herself. She thought she should have insisted more that Betty leave him. After Betty's funeral, Dorothy swore she'd never let another woman die like her sister. Now everything fell into place. Mom's secret mission, her unwavering determination to help strange women. The recipe book wasn't just a collection of recipes, it was a book of lives she saved. I spent the next week tracking down people from Mom's entries. I couldn't find everyone. Some had moved. Others changed names for safety. But those I found told amazing stories. Susan Jones now lived in Akron and worked as a nurse. She told how Mom not only helped her escape an abusive husband, but paid for her nursing school education. Carol Wilson became a social worker in Detroit. Her daughter Emily, who was a child when Mom helped them, was now a doctor. Every woman I spoke with called Mom their savior. Some sent money for the funeral, though I hadn't asked. One woman flew from California just to visit Mom's grave. Finally, I contacted Maria Gonzalez. It turned out she lived in Orlando, Florida, and owned a successful Mexican restaurant. "Your mom saved my life," Maria said through tears over the phone. "My husband promised to kill me and the children if I tried to leave." Dorothy didn't just give us shelter. She gave us a new life. How did you meet her? I worked as a janitor at the grocery store early mornings. Dorothy saw bruises on my hands. Instead of just feeling sorry for me, she asked if I needed help. I was afraid to talk at first, but she was so kind. Maria told how Mom secretly gave her extra work at the store so she could save money to escape. How she organized a safe place for her and the children. How she helped get a job in another city and even gave money for the first month's apartment rent. I sent her a Christmas card every year, told her how we were doing. My children grew up, got educated. All thanks to your mom. Mom never mentioned your cards. She asked me not to sign them with my full name, for safety. I just signed M with gratitude. I remembered those cards. Every Christmas, Mom received several anonymous cards, signed S, family, K and children, L with love. I thought they were from distant relatives or old friends. Turns out they were from her girls, what Mom privately called the women she helped. A month after the funeral, a middle-aged woman came to see me with 2 teenagers. "Are you Sarah Miller, Dorothy's daughter?" "Yes, I'm Jennifer Thomas. Your mom saved me and my children 15 years ago. We'd like to do something in her memory." Jennifer turned out to be the last woman in Mom's recipe book. The November entry read, "Jenny with boys. Temporarily at Sister Reza's, then own apartment. Your mom helped me get a job at the bank, paid for accounting courses. Now I'm a branch manager. My sons are in college." Jennifer handed me an envelope. "This is to create a fund in your mom's name to continue her work." The envelope contained a bank statement for $50,000. "Jennifer, this is too much." "No, it's too little for what she did for us. And it's not just from me. We contacted other women Dorothy helped. Everyone wants to contribute." Over the next 2 months, over $200,000 was collected. Women sent money from across the country. Many told their children the truth about how they escaped domestic violence for the first time. We created the Silent Angels Fund in Dorothy Miller's name. The fund helps women and children escaping domestic violence get education and job training to start new lives. On the fund's opening day at the city library, over 100 people gathered. I'd never seen half of them before. They were Mom's girls and their children, many who came from far away. The mayor of Toledo declared May 15th, Mom's birthday, Dorothy Miller Day. At the grocery store where she worked, they hung a memorial plaque in memory of Dorothy Miller, who quietly changed the world one life at a time. Pastor Matthews admitted he knew about Mom's secret activities and sometimes helped by providing church shelter. Dorothy asked me not to tell anyone. She didn't want fame or recognition, just wanted to help. I never learned how much money Mom spent on her secret mission over those 30 years, but now I understood why she never had savings, why she drove an old car and wore thrift store clothes. Every dollar went to saving other people's lives. Mom's recipe book now has a place in the City Museum, in a special display case with a plaque. The Book of Salvation, the story of one woman who believed every life was sacred. But the most important discovery waited for me at the very end. On the last page of the recipe book, after the apple pie recipe, Mom had written, "If someone reads this after my death, know this. Every dish was prepared with love. Every name in this book is a saved life." I wasn't a hero. I just remembered my sister Betty and didn't want anyone else to suffer like she did. If you can help even one person, do it. The world gets better one good deed at a time. With love, Mom. Under these words was glued an old photograph of a young woman with kind eyes. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, Betty Miller Davis, 1945–1967. Never forget. I stared at the photo of the aunt I never knew existed for a long time. She looked like Mom, the same kind eyes, the same gentle smile. And suddenly I understood the main thing. Mom carried the pain of loss her whole life, but turned that pain into the power to save others. Today, a year after Mom's death, the Silent Angels Fund has helped 47 women with children start new lives. We've opened training courses, a psychological support program, a temporary housing system. Every Saturday, I visit Mom's grave and tell her about the new people we've helped, about children who now grow up safe, about women who got education and found good jobs. And each time I leave the cemetery, I think about how Mom was right. The world really does get better one good deed at a time. Sometimes the most important deeds are done so quietly that we don't even suspect them. Mom's recipes live on, but the most important recipe she left wasn't in the cookbook, but in our hearts. The recipe for turning pain into love, fear into courage, silence into action. And this recipe will pass on, one saved life at a time.